It's Ash from Super Videos, back for another video for Season 9 of The Walking Dead. This is going to be my episode review for the last episode of The Walking Dead, Season 9, Episode 15, called The Calm Before, the lead up to the finale. Now, I did say this many times. This was in many ways just as big as a finale and maybe even bigger than the finale that we're going to have next week. But unlike the title, the episode was anything but calm, and there was definitely a lot of interesting and exciting stuff that happened for comic readers, of course. But I will go through my review here real quick. But in generally speaking, I loved this episode. I think this was one of the strongest episodes that we've seen in a long time, and I would even say it's my favorite episode of The Walking Dead. I do have my thoughts on the ending, on the actual deaths that happened. I'll do a separate video on that as well, but I will kind of quickly discuss that as well here. Now, starting off with seeing Miles and his wife at the hilltop and getting a little backstory for them before they were kidnapped by Alpha and snatched up and killed. I absolutely love that. Now, this is something that I feel was rushed a little bit, the backstory that they gave them, because they were just in this episode. This was their first episode, and they gave them this kind of very short and quick backstory. I think it was a little rushed. Did I want them to invest more time on that? No. I think that it was a good decision to keep the backstory short and relevant, and not bring them in early just to kill them off later on. So I think that that was a good decision, and I loved that they brought that in there. Obviously, we knew this was coming. We talked about this before the episode. We kind of identified the mask that one of the Whisperers was wearing was Miles' face. We knew where things were going. In terms of his wife, we didn't necessarily know what was going to happen to her, but I absolutely love that we have one of the Whisperers wearing the face of Miles, and Alpha, of course, wearing the dress and wearing the wig of the wife. So I thought that was all pretty well done, and I absolutely loved that intro. In terms of the fair, everything we saw at the fair, I absolutely loved. I mean, everything was calm and happy, but at the same time, you could definitely feel the intensity rising. You could feel that something was about to happen. And I loved the build-up, and I loved that they incrementally added things to the happiness at the fair to make us see that, things may not necessarily be as they seem. They may not be as happy as they seem. And I love the fact that they didn't invest too much time at the fair. They didn't have half of the episode just be the fair and, nothing additional to that. So I loved the additional stuff that they added in there with Alpha and the scenes that we had with her at the fair, which I'll get to in a minute. But the thing I do want to say quickly right here that I absolutely enjoyed was how they went back and forth with the timeline and how they had the events of the aftermath of the Pikes massacre and the aftermath of the fair mixed in with the events of the fair itself. And I love the fact that they kind of switched things around a little bit, and they didn't necessarily made it as linear as we thought it was going to be. One, it added to the mystery of the episode, and the other, it made the fair more interesting. And, it took away some of the repetitive or boringness of the episode that the fair, or having just the fair, may have brought. Now, I also love the fact that they kept us guessing about the victims right till the end. Well, at least when it comes to the last victim. But I absolutely loved how they integrated the fair aftermath with the fair itself. And, mixed in a few things in there to get us very excited about what's going to happen for those of us that knew the Pike scene was coming. And part of that was when we saw Daryl, Yumiko, Carol, and Michonne being surrounded by the Whispers, Alpha and Beta. And I absolutely loved Daryl's reaction to seeing Beta. That was a great scene. I loved that they didn't spoon feed it to us, that Daryl was shocked and he was a little terrified. I loved that they had that subtlety in there and they didn't just spoon feed that to us, but we understood. Daryl was confused, shocked, surprised to see Beta, and he was terrified because he didn't know what to do. He felt helpless and hopeless. I absolutely loved that. Now, going back to the part with Alpha at the fair, I loved the reveal of Alpha at the fair. I thought that was very well done. I wasn't expecting it, even though I knew that we could see Alpha. I loved the fact that they made the scene in a way where we didn't necessarily know what we were looking at until we really knew what we were looking at. Like, they kept it a little mysterious, even though they had Alpha in the scene initially. I loved how they did that. And also, seeing Alpha talking to Ezekiel, I really enjoyed that as well. I think that they couldn't have chosen a better character for Alpha to have a conversation with, because Alpha and Ezekiel are complete opposites. And for Alpha to really blend in, she really needed to, bring out her acting, you know what I mean? And to kind of fit in and to talk to Ezekiel and to try to get Ezekiel to trust her. And this goes back to what I said before, where they kept us guessing until the very end, because they showed us that scene with Alpha and Ezekiel talking. So, to audiences or comic readers specifically, Ezekiel was right away in our conversation. We thought something was going to happen to Ezekiel. So I love that they kept us guessing for the last death, specifically with Henry, and how they made us not really know whether it's going to be Henry, Ezekiel, or both. I absolutely loved that. Now, going to the part with Alpha being at the theater, talking to Lydia, or grabbing Lydia's hand first, and then getting a reveal later on about their conversation, I absolutely loved that as well. And I love the fact that they added this in there. It wasn't in the comics. It was something exclusive to the TV show. And I loved how they made that play out. I loved the conversation between Alpha and Lydia. I think that specific moment with Lydia rejecting Alpha was the pivotal point that pushed Alpha to do what she did, which is kill everyone. Now, before jumping into the Pike scene, I loved the scene they had prior to that, which was the Mega Herd reveal. Now, this scene happened in the comics, but it was between Alpha and Rick. I loved that they gave that to Daryl. I wasn't too sure about it, but I think it really made sense. It worked. It wasn't really surprising because many people speculated that that would happen before the episode, but I loved that scene and how it played out, and the subtle hints that they had about the Pikes in the conversation that Daryl and Alpha had. I absolutely loved that. And I loved the CGI that we saw with the herd. It didn't look bad, it looked perfect. And, you couldn't really tell that it was CGI. So I absolutely loved that it looked real. It wasn't like the deer CGI. Then the scene that they added on top of that, which I didn't really expect us to see this season, honestly. I thought they would just skip over that, which was the Alpha crying and the Whisperer noticing or seeing that and getting killed by Alpha. I absolutely loved that. And even though I knew it was coming the moment that it played out, or the moment that the Whisperer saw Alpha, it was still great to see. A great iconic moment from the comics coming to life. Then we get into the Pikes reveal and Siddiq's story. I absolutely loved that they added the Siddiq part in there, the story that he told everyone, and how they connected that to the Pike scene. I absolutely loved that. Again, this was something that wasn't in the comics, it was just a TV show, so I loved that addition that they had in there. And I thought that it added to the emotional level of the Pike's deaths. The Pike's deaths themselves were underwhelming. To me, they had the emotional connection to the people, to the characters. They didn't have the emotional connection to us, fans. Now, they were surprising, they were shocking, definitely. But did they work? I don't think they did. Now, I will do a separate video talking specifically about the deaths and looking at individual deaths, but overall, I was underwhelmed or disappointed with the reveals that we got. One thing that I do want to quickly say is, aside from the deaths that we saw and the fact that I didn't really agree with them all, they didn't add anyone from some other communities, which I think went against everything that the Pike scene was about, which was that it needed to hit everyone from all communities in order to bring them together, to unite them. They didn't include anyone from Magnus Group, for example. They didn't include anyone from Alexandria, for example. Think about it. I don't think there was anyone there from Alexandria specifically. They didn't include anyone from Oceanside. And they added 2 people from the Highwaymen group, which was disappointing because as soon as they were introduced, I had a feeling that they were gonna be used in this scene, which goes against this scene being shocking and them trying to make this scene shocking. But again, I will do a separate video talking just specifically about that. But overall, I loved this episode. I think it was the strongest episode, obviously for season 9, but in general for the TV show, for the TV series. And it's gotta be my favorite episode ever. Even though I disagreed with the deaths or the picks for the deaths, I loved the episode as a whole. And I thought that it was done to perfection. Stay tuned for my discussion on the Pike's death list specifically, and also my breakdown of the sneak peek that was released for the finale. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video. If you like what you see, press like, subscribe for more content, and press the bell button to receive notifications for daily uploads.